Welcome to A Little TLC, the podcast where we embark on an enlightening journey through the ever-evolving world of education. I'm your host, Heather Volchko, and I'm on a mission to empower educators and change makers to skillfully navigate the intricacies of serving our most exceptional students. Every month, we'll be exploring a unique and timely theme in a mini-series format, whether we're digging into inclusive teaching practices, addressing student mental health challenges, or exploring the intricate connection between our personal and professional lives. Each month offers an in-depth exploration of weekly topics that truly matter. I hope you're ready to be both challenged and inspired because this is A Little TLC. So this month we are talking about all things closure. If you're running a school schedule, you are coming into the month of May at this point, and that is the tail end, the countdown to summer break. It is kind of that natural closure that happens in any academic cycle. And so that's why we at TLC choose to put closure in the month of May. But the reality is that closure happens all over the place, sometimes without any warning, outside of our preference, and it just kind of happens to us. There are other times, like in the month of May, that we can actually plan for it and do some really cool things around, like walking through that with an intentionality. So this month with me for this entire series on closure, I have got Alex and Marla. Both of them are BCBAs in kind of school affiliated settings, but both in in-home and clinic settings. And so we're bringing this kind of a perspective to it. So thank you for jumping in this month. And I'm just going to hit us straight off the bat. So what is closure? Like when I'm saying closure, like what are the types of things that are popping up for you?
Yeah. Sorry, I just want when you were talking about, summer being around the corner, I was just thinking like this is like the time where it's after spring break,
Yep.
people have the travel bug, I'm like contemplating right now, like, why am I here? Why am I working? So you add that into the mix, and yeah, we are just facing all types of things right now. But to the most important thing that you're asking is closure, right? So yeah, I know to be quite honest, I think you can agree to this too, Alex, that we had to really think about closure, right? In our professional setting of like, man, like, have I witnessed closure? And I think like that's just the beauty of like working with other people and like talking to other people. And Alex is kind of talking, and I'm like, oh yeah. And then my thoughts, start thinking, I'm like, yeah, I've seen closure like this, or I didn't get closure in that. Um, but really, like closure for me is just that when something is left unresolved and then you are walking away with some type of distress and you're trying to like just like tie the loose ends. And
Mm,
so sometimes you get that positively, sometimes you get that you don't get that at all.
mhm,
Um, but as far as my professional career, I think I've seen that when I've transitioned from a behavior assistant to a BCBA, when I've had to transition cases, when I've been dismissed off a case, just due to
mhm,
parents' requests. Um, Also, like in the working with others, right? Like, did we leave on a good note? Did I not? Like, because we work with other disciplinary members. Um,
mhm,
and so some of those unresolving issues have, hindered my progress and personal satisfaction, I guess you can say. But um, there's a beauty that you can always you can always come around that. I don't know. What do you think, Alex?
Well, actually, I just want to say something what Heather said before. You guys were talking about closure with the school year ending, but it's funny because for me, it's like, clinic based, there is no closure because summer becomes the craziest time of the year for us.
mhm.
And it becomes far more hectic and things get crazier. So, it's actually closure in the sense I'm like, oh, thank God I don't have to go to a school. Now they're coming to me. So that's my closure for when the school year ends. I'm just like, oh, finally, everybody's clinic based or everybody's coming to the home. Don't have to go to a school for a little bit. Um, so that's my closure. No, but I agree with what you're saying, Marla. I've had that same transition as well from being an RBT to a behavior analyst, and it was tough because we had to let go of what we were currently doing. We had to let go of the cases that we had, and it wasn't not by choice but because we're transitioning into a new role, and it's difficult because you don't like, it's part of you doesn't want to, because you don't want to have that moment where you have to have that closure, because you don't feel ready to leave them and leave the people that for me, I was with a client for 5 years, and he was my first client ever. I saw
Mm-hmm.
him when he was 7, and I mean 8, and then he went to 13. I saw him in his teens, I saw him grow up. I saw him with a mustache, saw him shaving. So
Oh,
it's
buddy.
it's very hard because, and I guess in that particular situation, I was in so deep with that family and that client that when it was time for me to finally leave, and I was the one constant in his life. He had so many RBTs in and out of his life, so many BCBAs in and out of his life, and the one person that was a constant was me. And when it was time for me to finally go, and I still, I talked about this when I transitioned to my new company. You know, I felt I felt like I didn't do an adequate job. I felt like, there were things that I just, they were just left unresolved. I just left in this moment. I left in December. And it was tough. It was tough to, like, I remember giving him a hug and, thinking to myself, does he even realize that I'm leaving? And it hurt. Like, I remember I got in my car and I started crying.
Mm-hmm.
But
Oh, it
Yeah.
happens.
it
I did
was,
too. It's
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's happened to me multiple times.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, I didn't get that closure. It was just, it was gone. I didn't have that peace. Closure gives you peace. Closure
Yeah.
gives you an understanding that things will be okay. It gives you that acceptance to be able to move on to the next chapter of your life. And I always just felt like I had a bookmark there, and it was very hard for me to move past that. But while in this role, I learned that closure doesn't have to happen in that moment, and I think that's something that I'm still learning. I have to accept that you may get closure, you may not get closure, or you may get closure later down the line, because that client's mom reached out to me fairly recently, and she, told me about all his success, and, told me about, how, all those fights that we used to have back then, of him engaging in target behaviors, me intervening, jumping in, trying to separate him, doing all that stuff, him trying to, his parents be eating food and him just like snatching food off their plate and eating it. You know, all
He's
those things that
hungry.
she told me, she's like, none of that's happening anymore. He's growing up, he's
Yeah.
in a good place. And she sent me like a video of him for his 15th birthday. And like,
Um,
just looking at him, I like couldn't believe what I was looking at. I was just like in shock. And like, in the best way, not because I never thought he could get there, but because he is there, and
Mm-hmm.
he was able to do it without me, and that gave me like a sense of relief. And I feel a lot of the time closure does that.
like you're with clients and students every day, right? And like sometimes progress is happening, but you don't really see that until like you're away. You know, sometimes I get nervous, like when I have to leave, like, okay, like if I'm going on vacation or whatever, like, okay, like I'm gonna have like a overseeing analyst to like see this case, and then you come back and they tell you, like, oh yeah, like this wasn't an issue, they were able to do this, or like they're not prompt dependent, they did this, and it's like, what? And so kind of like what Alex was just saying right now, that you again, not that they were not ever gonna hit those goals or those milestones.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes like if you just kind of like go away for a bit, then you see all of that. So yeah, no, Alex, I was just kind of like finishing that for you, like how like
Thank
I'm
you.
putting my head over here. I'm like, yes, like I 100% know what he means.
Yeah. But, and I guess now that I've stepped into this role as a BCBA, those moments that I discussed, that was just because I had the transition. But then now I've experienced what it's like when somebody just leaves, and,
Yep. That's
and you've given
Mm-hmm.
like 110%. And,
Mhm.
sometimes they leave for things that, you can't control. I've had a client leave because of logistics.
Mm-hmm.
Mom was, doing all she could to make sure that he was traveling to a school that would accept him, but because his target behaviors were so intense that there was only one place that would accept him.
Mm-hmm.
And, we got into that school, we were with him for a year, and they actually opened up another school that was closer to them, that basically did the same services as this school. And at the end of it, she was like, it was hard for her. It was hard. And the fact that it was hard for her made me happy in a sense, because
Mm-hmm.
it was hard for her to leave, because we did such a great job working with him. In that scenario, I got my closure because one, she had nothing but some of the nicest things to say about myself and my team. Two, because I was able to hand pass the baton to the school and to his teacher in such a good way that she wrote down a lot of notes. She asked me a lot of questions. She emailed me. I could tell that the person that was going to be, taking on, the challenge of giving him his education, she was in it and she had the passion for it and she was excited to meet him. And she, I got that closure through that. And then, shortly after that, like a few months later, the mom emailed me and she was like, he's doing great. Everything is going well. He's, he's excelling in his classroom. And I got that closure there. But, there's also other scenarios where you don't get that. And, it could be a situation where maybe I'll hear it from this family later down the line, or maybe I won't. And
Mhm.
it's that part I'm still working on. That's the part of closure and acceptance that I'm working on. That is the part that, you know, not getting it and knowing that but I knew that I did 110%, but it's just like I never, I guess, get that validation. And I know I don't need that validation,
Yeah.
but it does help.
Yeah.
It
Well, I
does
think
help with it all.
I think, initially, like when Heather asked us again, like we were kind of like dumbfounded, like, okay, whoa, like I've had a closure in my personal life for sure, and like personal relationships, friendships, and family. But I think hearing Alex and even in myself, we've had many interactions when it comes to closure, good
Yeah.
or bad, right?
Right.
And so it's not that I'm happy to hear like, oh, Alex is going through this pain, yay. But it's not that, it's just that like we're
You
not the
get
only,
closure hearing that I don't have closure.
yeah, like it to know that we're not the only ones, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
That go
yeah.
through this. And many others go through that too. And I mean, they don't teach you closure in grad school, Alex, right? Like they don't teach you
No.
what you're gonna do when this comes. No, like no one trained me on that. And so earlier, I kind of had to come up with my own definition of closure, right? After you had asked me, Heather, I'm like, wait, like I don't even know. Like, okay, I know closure, this, blah, blah, blah. Um, so yeah, I think, and you know what? And it's not that it's the sad part, but I think in long term, we're going to continue to, finding ourselves
Mhm.
in these types of situations. And so, what are we doing now to prepare ourselves to the best that we can in the future? Because we do live, we work in a field where we're constantly going to be serving.
Mhm.
What if one day just backfires, or like they up and leave, or transitions, things like that. So
This week, it's Webinar Week. Dive into an exclusive webinar featuring insights from practitioners just like you, who've achieved remarkable success in their own corners of our education world. Whether you aspire to advance your career, explore new possibilities, or simply expand your horizons, our webinars cover a vast array of topics. Pre-recorded webinars offer the flexibility you need to fit learning into your busy life. You have the power to watch, rewind, and replay the content at your convenience. And did we mention you can earn continuing education units too? But that's not all. By becoming a member of the TLC Network, you gain access to professionals committed to walking this experience together. Learners get access to valuable webinars, enriching workshops, and engaging guest hangouts. Supporters gain access to our vibrant online community, monthly Q&A sessions, and joint discussions in a little PLC. Clever, right? Either way, you'll be among the first to access our podcast and blog pairing every week. Don't let time constraints hold you back. Embrace this incredible opportunity to invest in yourself and your profession. Join us for this week's webinar and seize the opportunity to learn, grow, and thrive on your terms.
And it's so interesting to listen to you two talk about this, though, because in education, there's a big focus on closure in May because our kids aren't coming back next year, right? Like I was always lucky as a special ed teacher that I could have students across multiple grade levels. So I could have, sixth grade, seventh grade, and eighth grade, or I could have ninth grade, 10th grade. Like I could have the whole high school. I could have like a whole caseload that was like 3 to 4 grade levels, right? Like even like kinder to 3, right? Like I could run multiple grade levels. So there was a stronger likelihood that my students would actually be coming back to me next year. Still no promises, right? Like some of them move, or some of my guys were incarcerated. I've had students pass away, right? Like there's all kinds of reasons that students, are not coming back or not returning. But I was always lucky in the education space that I could have my students up to maybe 2 or 3 years. So it's wild to me to like reframe my thinking and go, man, like what if my norm was that I would work with a student for 6 years, right? Like that is just like mind blowing, because in education, the focus is on 1 year. You have 1 year to do all the things, and you have to meet all of these standards, and you have to make all of this progress, and come hell or high water, that needs to happen. And if it doesn't happen, that's on you as a professional. Like you didn't do your job, right? Like this whole experience, right? So May is kind of the did it work or not? Like that is the end of the line, for so many educators, especially anyone in general ed, or if you work in a large district where your caseloads are just really large, so your departments are a lot bigger, and so you only have like I just have the freshman caseload. And then they move on to their next case manager, they move on to their next group of teachers, they move on, right? And it's just, have I done what I can do in that 1 year? So it's such an interesting reframing for me to hear like that depth of practice, because there's a whole lot of stuff that happens in 1 year. Like my guys are coming in every single day, all day, right? Unless they're, taken by other system that they're involved in. Like that's an all day, everyday thing. And so we're living 5 days out of any given week potentially with each other. And if not, then we're, chatting and connecting and trying to do like virtual learning and all these other things. Like the depth of relationship that is built across just 10 months is insane. And so to take that and multiply that out across 6 years, to me, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like that is if I get some random Facebook friend request from some old student or something, like that's about as much as I get in that realm. And that's happened to me too, right? Like old students who are like, hey, look, I just had a baby, or hey, check out my new job I just got, or like whatever, like after they've moved on. But that's not the norm. There's nothing built for that. That is because of the rapport, because of the relationship. And that's, I think, Alex, a lot of what you were talking about is because of being the service provider that you are, because of that rapport that you have built with people, they continue to provide information to you. And that is actually kind of what creates that closure for you, because the system isn't going to do it, right? Like services are over, they've moved, it is what it is, like that's done. But it's because of that rapport and because of that relationship with people that kind of like continues through it. But I don't know, as I'm thinking about closure, I mean, it's all change, right? If there's no change, there's no reason to have closure.
I was going to say too that like I hear you talking, Heather, right, about students like that, but like what about teachers? What about
Mm-hmm.
like admins? What about like leaderships, right? Like it's one thing about students, it's a different thing too. Like if teachers don't come back, or like
Exactly.
they, different, there's been a change or a shift in leadership, an
Mhm.
admin. I've experienced that too. So, when you're kind of talking about that, I was just thinking like, yeah, that students are just one thing. Like,
Yep.
just imagine like different colleagues, different people, different admin, like all of those things. Which reality is like, and you can correct me wrong if I'm wrong, but that happens in the school settings,
Oh,
right? You have
constantly.
different teachers, right?
And I mean,
So,
like, you're really speaking to like you and I do a lot of work in like OBM, organizational behavior management, and kind of
yeah,
that IO psych, industrial organizational psychology, right? Like,
yep,
that's what you're talking about. Like, you're talking about transition, change, and closure in the system, right?
yep,
And so I think some of the stories that we started off this conversation with are those direct results, of, the system, if it's family systems, or if it's, insurance systems, or whatever that system is that it may be situated in. But
sorry, I'm like
like,
ill insurance.
well, I mean, like it's whoever those governing bodies are that get to decide if we get to do what we want to do or not, right? Like whatever we think is best practice. There are sometimes decisions that are made that don't allow us to do those things, which then means we are abruptly dealing with a change, which is then going to necessitate, closure in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
But yeah, you're talking about closure at a systems level. And especially this time of year, there are lots of staff that are moving on to other things. They're choosing to leave the profession. They're
yep.
shifting hierarchies, right? They're going from a teacher to an administrator, or an administrator to district, or shifting districts altogether, right? Like there's all kinds of like that staff shell game happens in May for sure. So now as adults, we are dealing with our own closure in our own workplace while we're trying to create closure for our students walking into summer, right? Like all the layers of all of the things for
And you
sure.
have it, and then not to mention extended school year,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And then some people don't come back for summer school, they have subs. So
Hmm.
I'm just thinking like, yes, like all of those you know, those things that like we're trying to prepare for. And I know schools, they do the absolute best, but there's always something that's going to come that's going to prompt, like, oh man, did not get closure from that. So, so as I was hearing you speak, I was just thinking even that like, Heather, that's not even talking about like the other folks in the system,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So, yeah.
And it's tough. I mean, here in Florida, I mean, it's been tough. I mean, we've had a lot of like teachers just, drop out completely, just given like what it's like to be a teacher. I mean, my girlfriend, who you met, Heather, and how we
Mm-hmm.
connected, she was a former teacher. She was a teacher for, I want to say, 8 years,
Mm-hmm.
and the system just grinded her down and burnt her out to a point. And she used to do E- ESOL and special needs kids as well, and just all in one class. And
Yeah.
she had tough classes and no support. And it's been very, and hearing her stories and just thinking about, from my perspective, as someone that comes out externally, like to be part of the school system versus what she was doing. And it's just crazy. And I can understand why there is so much turnover. I mean, this year alone, one of my clients had four different teachers
Yeah.
in 1 year.
Oh boy.
And
Yep.
for a lot for our kids, they need that consistency. And it's like you're throwing in 1 year four different teaching styles at one kid that
Mm-hmm.
was just starting to get used to teacher number one.
Right.
And it was a lot. And it's very interesting because at this point, like, a lot of the parents and in that classroom, they're just already like they're fed up with it. They're fed up with, like, what's happened to their kids, and like
Mm-hmm.
the shifts in teaching styles, and seeing their kids not excel and not meet those goals that the school had set out for them, meet their IEP goals, like all of that. It's very interesting, and it's also very hard too, because mom tells me like, hey, this is what's going on in school, and all I can
Mm-hmm.
do to help is, like, I mean, I could reach out to the teacher and set something up, but I'm very limited of what I can do at that point, because we're not in the school for him in particular.
Mm-hmm.
um but for other kids I've worked with, it's been challenging. I had a client that changed schools 3 times in 1 year,
Yeah.
and he went from like a really bad school to an okay school to like a school. And we followed him all the way through.
Yep.
And it was just just seeing him in so many different settings and how much that affected him. I just saw so many new behaviors pop up, because he just didn't know how to cope, and he didn't know how to understand like why he keeps moving, what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it was to this day he was the most challenging, because I also felt that I wasn't equipped, in a
Yeah.
sense. Like, they don't teach you how to help a kid transition between different schools in grad school either.
Yeah.
They kind of, there's no paper that you can look up on, Java that says, hey, this is how you do. There's nothing out
I
there.
wish there was, but there isn't.
There isn't. I mean, maybe I should have done one because I had the experience.
There we go.
But, it was tough. It was very tough to, like, just see him, struggle. And then on top of that, where he ended up wasn't even the best for him, because, because with it all, like, just like, I guess, Forrest Gump, life's like a box of chocolates. Well, schools are like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get. You
Yeah.
get a phenomenal school where teachers are with it, they want to do whatever they can, and you'll get some schools where nobody cares, they're burnt out, they're tired. And like you said, May
And
is the month
understandably
where
so, right? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
exactly
like, okay.
they're under supported, understaffed. Like, there's so many contributing factors. But even more so, like May, like you said, May is like, the whatever month is like, oh, June's next month.
It is what it
And I
is.
Exactly. And I can speak on that from a personal level, because I know when May came, my girlfriend was like hands up in the air, like counting down when June was hitting.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's tough. And I given how many schools I've been in throughout my entire like ABA career, it is, it's very tough to find that one perfect spot that, like, that if you were to ever leave, you could find that closure. And I found that in a couple of schools, but there was one particular client that when we left that school and we left certain, like, we DC'd services with them, it hurts. It hurts, and like I still think about it, and I'm worried that I hope he's okay, because I know the classroom that he was in was not the best, and I know him finding services after us is going to be a challenge because there's a wait list everywhere you go. Even though
Mm-hmm.
there's a million different ABA clinics, I know he's going to have a hard time finding one that's perfect for him, because he just has so many different little behaviors and quirks that not one right person, if you're not right and if you don't show that warmth for him, it's going to be tough. And
Yeah.
I that is something that I still am worried about, and I don't have closure for, and I hope to get closure for it one day. But it does worry me, and I guess that's just because of how much we devote ourselves to our clients and to our
Right.
families. And
Exactly.
you know we it's tough. It's tough, and it's tough to, yeah, try to not think about it too much and get stuck on it. And I think that's something Marla said that was really important. And my boss also mentioned this to me as well when he ended up leaving us, was you can't get stuck on it. You can't, you did all you could. You followed that kid to 20 different schools. You did what you did. You chased that family down to do parent trainings. You did teacher trainings. You did everything you possibly could to equip everyone with the
Yep.
tools needed to help him be as successful as possible. So just take solace in that, and you just got to move on, because if not, you get stuck in it, and then that just drags you down. I'm still
Mhm.
trying to figure that part out. I'm still trying to figure out how to not let that go.
Let me know
Especially
if
with,
you find it.
yeah,
Well, I hate to land us here on the cliffhanger, but that is next week. So next week we are talking about unresolved endings anyway. So I think I'm gonna let this be this week, and we'll come back with great ideas next week.
Sounds good.
maybe I'll have an ending to that story.
Yes. Hey, before you jump back into your busy life, we want to invite you to head over to thresholdlearning.org, your one-stop destination for all things TLC. Here you'll find our blog with this episode's show notes, our ever-expanding bookshelf of resources, and anything else we've talked about. Trust us, there's a ton of benefits waiting for you to explore. Just head over to thresholdlearning.org, click on network, and we'll see you on the inside. Sharing the podcast with your colleagues is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at Threshold Learning TLC on Facebook and Instagram. A personal recommendation is by far the best way to share the podcast. Let them know they can listen on iTunes, Spotify, and anywhere else they catch their podcasts. Just be sure to leave a rating and review on your favorite platform. You can email us at info@thresholdlearning.org. We always enjoy connecting with fellow educators and champions for educational justice. You can find everything you're looking for at thresholdlearning.org. See you there.